Welcome to another edition of LaborVision Podcast. I'm your host, James Dennis. American Workers First and LaborVision Podcast present the 2020 Vision for Labor. I am with my host, Charles Daniels of CWA Local 4123. The ideal is to energize, educate, and engage our listeners. And this is what we're going to do today. Today, we got a very, very special podcast coming up. So you want to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with everybody. Like, subscribe, and share with everybody. This is some very important information on a very, very important bill that's getting ready to come out. Charles.
Yes, sir.
What are we dealing with today?
We're talking about the PRO Act. That is an acronym for the Protecting the Right to Organize. Let's start off by introducing our esteemed panel here. We have a lot of knowledge on this show. This is Tina Culver, president of 4009.
Hello.
You met Jimmy. This is Maurice Dupree, the president of CWA 4100.
Hello, how you doing?
At the end of the table down there, we got the living legend, Dave Skatarchek, CWA president of 4050.
Greetings.
And then on the phone, joining us via the cell, we have Reiner Delgado, the president of CWA 4108.
Hello.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. What we're going to do, because the PRO Act, there are so many things that go into it. We could spend an hour talking about each individual element, but instead we have an agenda right here where we're just going to kind of go through things, talk about each individual element for about 5 minutes. Jimmy's going to keep us honest on that right there to try to bring as much awareness as we can. So here we go. Now, this is H.R. Bill 2474, Protecting the Right to Organize. This bill amends the National Labor Relations Act and related labor laws to extend protection to union workers. So our first agenda item is enact meaningful penalties for companies that break labor laws and violates employees' rights. So currently, the NLRA provides only for lost wages minus any money earned through work in the interim. Losing your job because of ULP costs workers far more than that, but this bill would give the National Labor Relations Board, which enforces labor law, new power to enforce companies to pay up to $50,000 per violation. So that's some teeth right there. It would also award workers compensation for the damages they experience when they are retaliated against, not just back pay as they currently are entitled to. And when you look at this, about 40% of companies whose workers vote to unionize are charged with violating federal labor laws during union campaigns, according to federal data from the Economic Policy Institute. So let's take a minute to talk about that.
So you know what, Charles? Let's go back one step. This is called the Protecting the Right to Organize, H.R. 2474, and Senate Bill 1306. So let's just write that down. Senate Bill 1306, H.R. 2474. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this just has to do with the fact that you're imposing penalties on companies that are breaking the law. This is 80 years of labor law. So this isn't something that is being created by the act. This is just establishing parameters where there are penalties associated with it. Because if there were no penalties for breaking the law, well, then who would actually follow the law?
True that. All right, let's get on the first topic.
Anyone feel free to jump in?
Captive audience meetings. That's the one, right? That's what we're on?
We're on the first one, which just has to do with the penalties associated with it. I'd talk about this. The CEO of Barstool Media, who is out of California, he recently got in trouble because he sent out a tweet, which is very public, that said if anyone DMs this person that was attempting to organize the company, he would fire them on the spot. And then after he got a lot of flack for that, he doubled down on that violation of the labor law by saying, I can't wait for these people to come back so that I can squish them again. So not only did he break the law once, but he broke the law for a second time. If we were to continue to violate the laws, I'm sure they would have a very different opinion if we did it. So this would take someone like that who is flaunting the law openly and actually be able to impose penalties, and the board would decide the level of those penalties. So it wouldn't just be a one-size-fits-all. If it's a small company that violates the law, it'd be a small penalty. But if you got a big company that does it and they're doing it over and over again, you could get substantial penalties.
Right there. It looks like sounds like he's in for about 100,000 plus back wages.
Off the jump. And I believe, I don't want to be wrong on this and talk out of school, but I believe they found out that the Twitter account that they were referencing, the company actually made that Twitter account to try to catch people that were looking to organize, which if someone's that afraid of having a union in their workspace, there's a good reason why. And it's not because it helps them, it's because it actually helps you.
And this is one of the main reasons why we need this new act, because of the process that he tried to implement. He didn't have any regard for any penalties, because at this time the teeth that the NRA has is not strong enough to even set a set fine or penalty for him. And when Charles first brought this topic to me, I was brought back to a situation that happened in my local where we had a case, we won the case, everything was settled. We had won monies for our one of our members, and then at the last minute, the labor group changed, and at that point they changed the ruling, and they said that the owner who claimed bankruptcy all of a sudden didn't have to pay.
And can I stop you real quick, Maurice? Sure. Is that President Ryan Letts on the line right there?
It is, brother. Good morning.
Good morning. We have someone else joining us right now. That is Ryan Letts, the president of 4034. He is also the president of the Michigan Unified Council. So thanks for being on the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
You know, I think we got to talk a little bit about why is this important. I mean, what does it mean to the average worker? What does it mean to a non-union or unorganized worker?
Right.
Why is it important to them? Why should they get on board? You know, and it's a very simple question. Over the years, especially the past 20 years, we've seen a decline in organized union membership because the corporations that we attempt to organize in the businesses are allowed to violate the law anytime they want with impunity, with absolutely no fear of any kind of punishment. Mm-hmm. So it's making organizing almost impossible. That being said, we haven't seen real progress in the middle class because of this. The actual spending power of what's left of the middle class is diminished. While some presidents of the United States are touting a wonderful economy, it's an economy that's wonderful for whom?
Right.
Generally not the workers, especially the unorganized workers. The fact of the matter is after World War II, and after the New Deal, when the National Labor Relations Act was created, a strong labor movement arose. We had the largest and strongest middle class in the world. The rich were rich, but the middle class had spending power, and we had the best economy in the world.
That's true.
Since then, and diminishing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the private sector now, about 5.5% of workers are organized.
That's right. Yep.
That means 95% of all workers are working without the benefit of a labor agreement, without any way to negotiate a pay raise, completely dependent upon minimum wage, and we're all suffering as a nation. So, it's a simple thing. Do you want people to obey all the road laws for driving a vehicle? Yes. Do we want people to obey all the laws? You don't want to rob somebody. You don't want to rob a bank.
Right.
Then why is it okay for corporations and businesses to violate federal law on a daily basis?
Dave, this is the reason why we like you on LaborVision, because you're a wealth of knowledge, which means we need to go to the next topic, which is captive audience meetings. My favorite, to sit in a meeting and listen to a whole bunch of blah, 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 why you should not be in the union. Anybody on this one? Captive audience meeting. How many of you all have ever been to one?
I've seen a video of them, but I've never actually, and of course we'd never allow something like that to happen. But let's explain what a captive audience meeting is. Ryan, could you kind of talk the folks through what exactly a captive audience meeting is?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So a captive audience meeting is typically used at employer locations. It's a required meeting, and it's intended to coerce the employees, and is designed to discourage union membership, to dispel any truths that are out there in regards to the labor movement or what an organized facility or employee location would be, and certainly allows management or the owners of the company to spread falsehoods and lies regarding what it means to be protected under a collective bargaining agreement.
Yes, and if they don't sit in and be a part of that meeting, they can be fired.
Right, and I just
Absolutely.
wanted to comment on that, Ryan. In my local, a few years ago, we had a company that had a captive audience, and part of their spiel was all the things that you mentioned, and it was while they were at work, so they had nowhere else to go. They scheduled them all to be in this meeting. They provided them lunch, and then they told them all the reasons why they should be decertified and leave the union. And so this is something that they had been trying for years and years to do. And unfortunately, they had enough members to overturn what we already had established for years in this organization by one vote. But the advantage was that it was all done on their premises. And so they had, for a better word, home field advantage in terms of what they could do and what they could say. And then they hired new people who didn't have any idea of what a union was. And so those people could only go by what the company that just hired them told them. And so they were able to do the decertification, which means they were able to vote the union out. So these are some of the things that this new act would prevent companies from doing in the future that would help encourage members to stand up and to be more proactive in what they really want.
All righty. Next topic, because we got to move on because there's a lot to this bill. Permit unions to engage in secondary boycotts. Who's going to speak on that one?
Reiner, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Well, it's kind of like, right now it's currently illegal under the NLRA to engage in a secondary boycott. What happens is, a lot of places you have workers being classified as contractors in past situations. They've been unable to even picket at their actual work location. They work there, but since they're a contractor, they're like, no, you're not an employee. So they can't even picket. That's considered a secondary boycott. You can't go and picket and help other workers, in solidarity. You can't do a general boycott, a general strike, because that's considered in a lot of cases it would be a secondary boycott. So this would kind of change that. It would give a lot more power to try to encourage these employers to be just to their workers.
And to jump behind that as well, to give an example, there was a company, I believe, again, it was in California, where these workers were at a certain location every single day, but they actually worked for a different company. They were subcontracted out of there, and the NLRB ruled that because they did not actually work for the company that the location they were at every single day, they had no right to picket that location, even though they worked there every single day. I mean, the First Amendment guarantees you a freedom of speech, you freedom to gather. So if there's something happening that's negatively impacting your work, letting the public know about it, to me, that's a constitutional right. I don't know how this has gotten this far to begin with.
Yeah, and next topic is revise the definition of employees and supervisors to prevent employers from classifying employees as exempt from labor law protections. Who's going to speak on that one?
Well, I'd like to
Dave's
say
guitar check.
This is a biggie. I mean, it's absolutely obscene that you can have people working for minimum wage and they are excluded from joining or organizing into a union because they're called managers. Now, the National Labor Relations Act is supposed to say in there, and this is almost a direct quote, but I'm paraphrasing, is a manager is someone who can affect the hiring and firing of an employee.
Right.
So if you're in charge of making hamburgers, you're not a manager of those hamburgers because you're not going to hire or fire the hamburger. This is ridiculous. I mean, we're laughing, but this is happening, depending on industry. Just one way. Okay, they're all managers.
Right.
Or even worse than that, they're all independently employed. And I pay them by a 1099. That's another mechanism they use that I hope this will address.
Right. And in here in Michigan, Dana Nessel is addressing that now. She's got that on her desk as we speak. She's looking at companies that's using 1099s for all their employees. That's just their way of hiring people. Everybody's a 1099 and not an employee. And she's kind of coming down hard on them. So shouts out to Dana Nessel for that, the Attorney General of Michigan.
Absolutely.
And that needs to be corrected, and I'm sure she'll do that for us, because it gives the companies the right to hire these people for days at a time, weeks at a time, and then just let them go.
Right.
You know, that is not what we're about.
They're not employees is what they're classifying them as.
Exactly.
They're not employees, so they have no right to organize, no right to do anything.
No say-so whatsoever in the workforce that they're being asked to do the work in. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just real quick, Jimmy, I mean, studies show that over the past 30 years have estimated that hundreds of thousands to millions of workers are misclassified as contractors when they should be employees. So you're talking significant numbers. This is not small potatoes.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, okay, the next point is permits workers to participate in collective or class action litigation. You want to speak on that?
And then also to add to that, it also allows any person to bring a civil action for harm caused by labor law violations or unfair labor practices, because a lot of times when you're unjustly dismissed from a company, it can take ages to actually get a remedy. President Letts, this is something that you have real firsthand experience on. Would you mind kind of talking this through?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. So certainly the National Labor Relations Board is there to make sure that unfair labor practices do not exist or do not continue to go on. If they do happen to exist, and let's face it, they exist out there. There's lots of unfair labor practice acts that are done by employers. So certainly there is a process established, but when it comes to discharge cases, obviously employees are under some very severe economic harm when they are discharged unjustly and in violation of the National Labor Relations Act. The PRO Act would allow injunctions to take place, stopping or forcing the stop of employers engaging in unfair labor practices. It would also expand penalties for labor law violations, which what I understand is that not only is there a penalty or monies due for someone that's wrongly discharged, but also there would then be an associated monetary penalty that could be put on by the National Labor Relations Board to employers that are causing serious economic harm to employees or an employee. And it would also allow a person to bring civil action for harm caused by labor law violations. Truly, what we're getting closer and closer to is something along the lines to where this would shift the mindset of it being an unfair labor practice into a situation to where labor rights would be treated as civil rights, and there would be more avenues out there for individuals to wage their complaint and get justice through our systems.
That is extremely well said. And to give an analogy on this, can you imagine that if you went to the hospital, you had to sign something that says, even if you go in there and the doctor prescribes you the wrong things, misdiagnoses you, botches your surgery, and you end up with a worse level of life forever, but hey, there's no such thing as a malpractice lawsuit because that's against labor laws. It makes no sense.
It is very important. Most people don't understand, while there is a National Labor Relations Act enforced by the National Labor Relations Board, there is no enforcement arm to actually force the corporation to do whatever the board ordered them to do. So they have to go to federal court.
Well, I tell you what, this act is very, very powerful, and it does put teeth in workers' rights. The next point we're going to look at is it ensures unions can collect fair share fees. And this is something that Right to Work kind of destroyed, because everybody want to go, I should have the right to be able to pay dues if I want to, but you shouldn't have the right to ask me for representation, to ask me to use my resources for you, which you do not contribute to. You know, that's just wrong. Who wants to jump on that one?
You know, Jimmy, I'll take that one.
Okay.
That is you are absolutely correct in what you said. This would ensure us to collect fair fees when representing our members. We spend a lot of time and hours delving into what happened when someone gets disciplined.
Yep.
And you take the right away from us under the right to work law to do that. Okay? Because if you are not paying dues, we still, as unions, have to represent those people in
That's right.
every term and ways that is established. You know, we're going to fight for you, absolutely. But the fees would help with us being able to collect a fair share to help us to fight the fact and fight the company on the issues of discipline, health care, whatever might be the reason that you're being disciplined for. So yes,
And it
the right
doesn't-
to work law has diminished that.
And here's the thing: it costs money to fight for you. Period.
does.
Let's just hit it right with.
Can you imagine that if somebody passed a law saying attorneys had to work for free?
Good point.
Attorneys would never allow that.
I mean, this is a capitalist
I need to get
society
an
we
attorney
live
now.
in. Everything costs money. It's very expensive. I'm a union rep, been a union rep for 48 years. Now, it's against the rules for me to go into the workplace and talk to an employee while they're at work about their grievance.
Right.
You're absolutely
So
right.
I have to remove myself from work, which means I'm not being paid,
Yep.
to go talk to the individual, to get the information, to process the person's complaint. So I like to pay my bills at home.
So who pays you?
Well,
who pays you to,
our
to go
local
out there and talk to them?
our local reimburses me for lost wages that I lose while I'm trying to represent people.
And where do they get that money from?
The dues the members pay.
But what about the ones that don't pay?
Well, that hurts us all. You know, you've heard the thing about a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Right.
Well, the reason the right to workers, or the right to work for lessers, they do this is because one way to weaken our unions, and I say that because there's a lot of different unions, it's not just one thing,
Right.
is to take their finances away.
That's right.
You take their finances away, you've neutered them
You're right.
and made them ineffective.
And then the other part of this, you all, is when we negotiate contracts, that costs money. Right. It costs money to negotiate that contract, and then you're going to reap the benefits of me going in there. Wait a minute. So if they don't have money to pay me to negotiate that contract, I go in there for free, and then you reap the benefits. You didn't even contribute towards getting the raise, the benefits, and the vacation time that you got.
One of the reasons we as workers organize is because an individual doesn't have enough money to fight a corporation like AT&T, who's got all the money. So we pool our money together, because if we're forced to go in front of an arbitrator, well, an arbitration can go from $5,000 to $50,000 by the time. Depends on the issue.
It's unlimited. It's
What
unlimited.
individual worker has that kind of money to take care of themselves? So we form unions as workers so that we can protect ourselves, so that if one of us, because we always say an injury to one's an injury to all, if one of us is fired without just cause, we have money that we can hire attorneys to go into arbitration, protect that person. And the threat of arbitration and losing an arbitration is the only thing that keeps a major corporation on the straight and narrow.
And you know what, Dave? You brought something to my memory. We had one of our units that the company decided not to pay their health care anymore. They just stopped. They just like, we're not paying it anymore. CWA, our union, put an injunction in. It cost money to get the attorneys to get the injunction in. Put the injunction in, fought it. They got their health care. And the injunctions stopped them from stopping their health care. But if the money wasn't there to get the attorney, to get the injunction, those people would have lost that health care. The woman that was pregnant that I was looking at, she would have had to pay to have that baby, for example.
Imagine this. Under right to work, imagine if every member of every union decided, I don't have to pay dues, and quit. And the company's promising you, well, they still have to represent you. Well, if all the members quit paying dues, then there's no stewards, there's no local presidents. Who's going to represent you?
It's going to be an empty office.
And could you imagine if that's how the country ran itself? If you decided that there was anything that happened to you that you didn't like, you could say, I'm not going to pay taxes anymore. I'm just,
for real?
You still want a military.
Wait.
Still
We can do that?
Still deliver my mail.
I still get the
I
roads?
still want a fire department.
I still get the
want
roads?
The roads.
Oh,
Exactly. I'm going to
okay.
send my kids to school,
I'm
but
done.
I don't like this specific thing, so I'm not going to pay taxes anymore. Y'all pick up the slack.
And that's the important part about this fair share part is even when we have people that we have to represent, and if without this fair share portion, which has been taken away, like you said, through the right to work issue, we wouldn't be able to even defend those people. And if they're going to reap the benefits, like Jimmy said earlier, then we need to be able to represent them, which means that officers need to be at these different locations, grieving for them as well as our own members, but members that don't know they're members because we have to represent everybody who works for that particular company. So this is a very important piece of the PRO Act that we have this fair share because we need that to continue to fight the fight to make sure that everyone gets their rights.
And understand what the companies would look for after that happened if everybody stopped paying union dues.
Oh, yeah.
They would be taking away benefits.
Yep.
40-hour work week, FMLA. They would go after everything they could. And it would
There goes the water cooler.
There goes the coffee.
There goes your break.
We could be going
Right.
back, and time would be turning back 50 and 60 years.
And let me say this. Union dues are not used for political campaigns.
They are
that is
not.
that is illegal.
Common
that is
misconception.
Yeah, it is. So many people, I don't want you guys. No, it's not. It's illegal. Any Secretary of Treasurer will tell you, and I used to be one, you can't use it for that. So that's a no-no. Let's get to our next point, and this is a really, really good one because you have a lot of work groups. I'm going to call them work groups, or that they vote, hey, you know what? We want a union. We want this. Okay, they vote. It's time for that first contract. And these companies just stall and stall because they don't want to give these folks the first contract. They don't want the union to be there. And they do all this stuff to get rid of them. The PRO Act actually deals with that. Who wants to deal with that piece of it?
I got a little story about that type of thing.
Go ahead, my brother.
It was probably, let me say, about 15 years ago. I had some friends who were doing organizing for the Graduate Student Union at Michigan State University, and all their graduate students, enough of them had voted to they were being organized by the wasn't the MEA, it was the other one, the Federation Teachers,
American Federation of Teachers.
Yep, and they had organized and they had their votes, but MSU kept dragging its heels because they didn't, there was no guarantee of binding arbitration and getting that contract. And to tie into another point we already made, the only reason they got MSU to the table to bargain is because there was some construction going on at Michigan State by the trades, and we knew the president there, and so we threw up a picket, or not we, but the graduate students threw up a picket in front of that building that was being worked on, and the trades wouldn't cross the picket line. So, that's the only reason that MSU came to the table, because they didn't have to.
Right. And that first contract is very, very, very difficult to get when you go in there. Heck, it's difficult just to get a regular old contract when you got a contract because they want to do retrogressive stuff to get stuff going on. So, I mean, this actually puts teeth in that where they go to a mediation, and so we can sit down and get a fair contract for the people that want a contract. Now, keep in mind, I have to say this about this act: a work group that don't want a union, this isn't going to force them to have a union. Let's be real clear about that, because everybody's like, oh, this is going to force. No, they voted the union down. There will be no first contract. There will be no mediation. This means absolutely nothing. But the people that do want a contract, this enables them to have teeth to get that contract.
If we have any employers out there listening, if you don't want your employees to be organized, treat them right and pay them well.
Yes. A lot of the factories that try to get organized, the companies are treating them well. So you treat them well, you treat them good.
Yeah, what folks have to realize is that unions have made wages and benefits rise, and everybody else, even if they're not organized, they to piggyback along. And and so when the unions were strong and the middle class was strong, even unorganized workers, they benefited as well. But as you see the decline, you see also the decline in folks who aren't organized, their wages, and they feel the pinch.
So you know what? Somebody's probably out there is probably going to say, aren't there already laws out there that protects unions, protects the right to organize? Aren't the laws already there? Why do we even need all this stuff? This stuff sounds like common sense.
Well, again, the National Labor Relations Board has no enforcement arm.
Who appoints that board?
The president.
So what if you have a non-labor friendly president?
You have a non-labor friendly National Labor Relations Board.
And that leads back to what I talked about earlier. When the board changed, any type of outcomes that we had won in the past mysteriously changed also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and you really have 80 years of labor law, but you've seen the decline of unions during that period, and it's, in my opinion, specifically because there are no teeth in labor laws. There's no penalties really for violating those laws. There are times when it gets better, depending on who's in power and which way the wind is blowing, but having something concrete like this, it's really a historic piece of labor legislation. It is a generational piece of labor legislation, and it's really important that people know that.
A good point, because it's really important. Most people aren't aware of what we call the law of the land, the National Labor Relations Act. How it's applied and used on a daily basis isn't really written into the law. It's decisions that have been made over the year by the National Labor Relations Board and awards. And as we know, a court decision can be overturned by the next court.
Yes.
So having things written into the law that can't be changed except by Congress is very important. That's why this act is very important.
Now, you know what? How many people do we have that have signed on to this so far in the House?
I'm not sure the exact number. I know in Michigan we have 7 of our members of Congress that have signed on. That would be Debbie Dingell, Brenda Lawrence, Andy Levin, Alyssa Slotkin, Haley Stevens, Rashida Tlaib, and goodness gracious, I missed one person, and now it's going to come. And Dan Kildee, who's on the Ways and Means Committee. They have signed on. Now our 7 Republican members of Congress have not. They are not for the PRO Act. They have their reasons for it. There are people that believe that you build the country by strengthening the middle class from the bottom up, and there's people that believe that you strengthen the company by funneling all the money from to the top. It's, supply side economics, and letting that money trickle down. And I believe that we have just decades worth of aggregate data that shows that that's not working. The income inequality rates right now in the United States have never been this bad since the late 20s, which is right around 1929 when we had the crash in the stock market, October 29th, which started the Great Depression. And the way that we built ourselves out of that was through things like the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. That's how you built the middle class. So this is getting back to this. We have to fix this before we end up in that crash again.
Well, I want to give shouts out to Representative Scott, Robert Scott. His name, they call him Bobby Scott, and he's out of Virginia. He's the one that put this bill together. So, and he has, according to the internet, if it's right, 218 co-sponsors.
That's fantastic.
So,
right, that's great.
Yeah, so that is pretty cool. And like I said, this came out of Virginia, and I don't know. With me personally, I don't understand why companies don't want a union. Because the thing is I don't have to deal with your pay. I mean, I can just go straight to the union just to deal with you. I don't have to deal with individuals. It seemed like it would be easier just to throw the blanket over, agree to a deal, and just make that deal, make it happen. Why do companies fight unions so hard?
Because they want to be czars. They want to lord over their workers. They don't want to empower them. They don't want them to have rights. They don't want them to be able to say, I'm not going to discuss this with you until I have a union steward present. Because there were a time that your Weingarten rights did apply to everyone else. You could go get another employee and bring them in, even if you weren't organized, but that was changed through a board ruling again, and they changed it where no, only unions have it. And this law right here just has to do with union members. But when you have those rights as a union member, it makes it so much easier to pass them along to someone else.
So, saying all of that, this bill is probably just going to die in the Senate, isn't it?
Unfortunately, if they continue to vote down party lines, that would probably be the case, but hopefully it won't.
Hopefully what we have to do is educate people. And that's what's going on right now through these podcasts. We have to educate people about unions. We no longer talk about unions in the schools. We have to do that. But could it? Yeah, it could. But, understand, since Trump has taken over, there's been 400 bills that have been passed in the Senate with bipartisan support, and McConnell has killed them. There's approximately 250 sitting in the Senate graveyard. It's people like us putting this out here to get people to make the calls to their legislators to demand their rights. And that's what we need to do.
Well, you know what? And then the other thing is this. I don't know when this is going to come up for a vote. We don't know. It could
Very
be
soon. It came out of the Labor Committee last September, so I believe within the next couple of weeks there's going to be a vote in the House on this PRO Act.
Okay, so that's in the House, but what happens if the vote of this comes up after the election?
It would depend on the election. I mean, 2020 is a very important election.
There you go. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Right.
Amy McGrath, 2020. She's running against Mitch McConnell. She's fantastic.
Very important for us to get a different Senate. Let me say that.
Yeah, a fair
Absolutely.
Senate. A fair Senate.
A fair Senate.
That's what we want.
Even just, there's a reason why he's blocking these bills. It's because he doesn't want those senators to have to go on the record voting against some of them, because a lot of the things that are in these bills, they do have bipartisan support, just like Tina said. And it's things that would help their constituents. And if they voted against them, it would look bad to their constituents. So Mitch McConnell is blocking them from having to be accountable to the people that they have sworn an oath to serve. And that's garbage.
Refusing to debate.
Right. Now, this PRO Act, is it going to help our economy? What do you guys think?
Anything that helps
Well-
working men and women improve their lot in life helps the economy. Again, a strong middle class is what made America great. A strong middle class with a strong labor movement can make America great again.
And I think I heard
Yeah.
Reiner jumping in there.
I was going to say, a middle class, they don't sit on their wealth. They don't hoard it. They spend it. They save some of it, but a lot of it is spent on activities for their kids, sporting. Going out, buying a shanty. Going out. When you go out hunting or fishing or whatever, you stop at the local establishment. You spend some money there. Your money goes back in. When your kids are out on the road, you go into the restaurant with your kids, after their softball or after their basketball or what have you, and you spend some money. You do the road traveling. I mean, the money does not stay locked up just building to obscene levels. People spend it on education. They spend it on trade school for their kids. It goes back into the economy. It doesn't sit. Folks who are working in the service industries, they reap the benefit because they're thriving as well. And it's not just, the unionized workers. It's those service workers who serve everybody. They have booming business. They get tips. They get wages. Everybody benefits.
You're so right. You're so right. But I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay, when we give the billionaires and CEOs a huge tax break, what do they do with the money?
They hide it in the Cayman Islands so that they don't have to pay fair share of taxes on it. But that is a different podcast, Dave Skatarchak.
So you know what? Let's do this. I want to give everybody a final thought. We're at that time. We got to shut this down. I tell you what, Charles, I'm going to let you pick who speaks first and who speaks last. How's that?
Okay.
My co-host.
Well, I'll jump in here with a final thought. Again, this is a historic piece of labor legislation, and a high tide raises all ships. We were just talking about how when unions gain, it makes these other corporations pull the level of living up for those other workers. And guess what? We're the canary in the coal mine. As these union memberships are declining, they're coming for you next. Once we're gone, it makes it so much easier for them to get you. And that's why even if you aren't in an organized workforce, you should be supporting the PRO Act. And now, are there pieces of this legislation that are questionable? Absolutely there are, but you have the ability to debate those in the Senate. You can talk about that. You can make amendments. You can make this more perfect, because we're supposed to be making this a more perfect union. That's the purpose of America.
Okay, who's next?
I'll go.
Go for it, Tina.
Charles is absolutely correct. When there's a strong middle class with a strong unions, it brings everybody up. Even if you're not in a union, it brings your wages, your health care, everything up to be able to provide for your family so you're not living on the streets. So as long as we have a strong middle class and go after the PRO Act, we'll have what we need. It will be a start, and we have to start somewhere.
Amen.
All righty. Maurice Dupree, come on with it.
I would say to that also, like Tina said, with the strong middle class, we need the strong middle class because, as you can tell, as the middle class is continuing to shrink, it doesn't mean that the upper class is increasing. What's happening is the lower class, or as they say, we have these tier systems in America. We have more and more people below the poverty level, so we need more middle class and more help for everyone so that everyone can enjoy this life that we have, because you're only promised a few years here on earth. So let's do something that's proactive that will help everyone to enjoy it while you're here.
All righty, Dave.
I would just like to point out to those listening who maybe have never been in a union or don't understand, there is no such thing as the union. We all say it, but there is nothing. I have my union. You may have your union. If you work in a business that organizes, then you have your union there. And every time a group of workers organize, they elect leaders, they elect stewards. So it's all different. There is nobody going to tell you what to do. You come together, form committees, and decide what's good for yourself.
All righty. Ryan, you're next.
Well, I want to go back and touch on just the overall scope when it comes to workers being wrongly classified as independent contractors, when it comes to the rights to organize and negotiate for better wages and standards. What we have currently are weak laws. There's no protection in regards to workers' rights. Certainly, there's no enforcement, as been talked about at the National Labor Relations Board, to enforce certain things that are law or contained in the act. So everyone has said it. I got to say it again. Better wages, better working conditions, they play a major role in increasing equality and increasing wages for all workers out there, not just unionized workers. So this PRO Act is certainly important in regards to leveling the playing field.
Well said.
All right, Rainer, you're next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a slogan that the party in power, in the presidency used in his last campaign, and it's just hearkening back to, an era, that was supposedly great, in some aspects, I guess what they're trying to refer to, but were they referring to prosperity? And if they were, that was an era when there was a much higher levels of unionization, there was a much larger middle class, and, there was more wealth getting out there and being spent so that everybody was being raised up. We had money for social programs, more money for that because there was a higher tax base. So, like it says, when the union ship rises, everybody else rises, because there's money and there's prosperity. You have protection, you have health, you have wages. I think that's what everyone wants. They don't want to be broke, they don't want to be sick, and if they are sick, they don't want to be bankrupted by sickness. So, that's a good reason to do that. And then when you're in the workplace like this act, you don't want your employer just flaunting the laws that are out there. You want there to be teeth, and you want there to be consequences if they do. So that's why this act is a good thing.
I think it has been well said. And this is the reason why we do this LaborVision podcast and American Workers First YouTube video. And we're going to be shooting you all kinds of information for the rest of the year and moving forward. Union Facts Friday, Charles does. It's all about getting educating you so that you can go out and do what you're supposed to do. That's what's best for your family. A lot of us vote against our own best interests. And we should stop doing that. And that's what this PRO Act does. It helps us to vote in our best interest if you really sit back and think about it.
And labor shouldn't be partisan either. Workers, they don't belong to a certain party. Talking about over 90% of Americans work for someone else. We are workers. We are the ones that have built the middle class. We are the engine that fuels this economy.
Don't be embarrassed by it.
Don't let someone pitch you against someone else. If you want to disagree about certain things, that's fine. But when it comes to workers having rights and being treated fairly and being properly compensated for what they do, that is across party lines. Don't let them trip you up with that.
That's right. And like, share, subscribe. We had Twitter feed at LaborVision, SE LaborVision. Charles, what's American Workers First Twitter handle?
USA Workers First.
USA Workers First, USA Workers First, and C LaborVision. All righty. We are out of here. We've had a great time. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you. We'll see you next time.